This year, September 30th, marks Orange Shirt Day and the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It is an opportunity for us to remember and honor the memory of 150,000 Indigenous children who were forcibly removed from their families and communities and sent to residential schools. As we work towards healing and a meaningful reconciliation, it is an opportunity for us to deepen our collective understanding of this dark period of our history and the trauma it continues to cause residential school survivors, their families, and their communities. It will be a long and difficult journey, but one we must commit to continuing. Let us work each and every day to strengthen our relationships with Indigenous people so we can create a brighter future for all Ontarians.
Hello, Mayor John Tory here. Today, September 30th, we commemorate the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. As we reflect on the importance of this day, I want to acknowledge that the land I'm speaking from is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabe, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13 with the Mississaugas of the Credit. On the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, we recognize the ongoing trauma caused by residential and day schools, and remember those who were lost, those who survived, and their families. The National Day for Truth and Reconciliation is also an opportunity to commit to the process of reconciliation with First Nations, Inuit, and Métis in Toronto and right across Canada. This is a day of reflection as we confront difficult truths and work to heal the wounds caused by generations of injustice. It is a truth that under the horrific residential school system, thousands of First Nations, Inuit, and Métis children were forcibly taken from their families and communities. It is a truth that these innocent children were stripped of their culture, their languages, and even, in some cases, their names. It is a truth that, tragically, many of those children never came home. The entire Indigenous community is impacted by the residential and day school system. Many survivors and their families live right here in Toronto. These are truths the Indigenous community has known for a long time. And now, the world is starting to listen, including people right here in the City of Toronto. On behalf of the City of Toronto, my thoughts are with the survivors of residential and day schools who live with that system's tragic consequences every day, and with the families and communities of those children who never came home. Today, flags at City Hall and civic centres are lowered to half-mast, and the Toronto sign will be lit in orange. These are small things we can do to make sure we visibly recognize the day. We also wear orange for Orange Shirt Day, which began in 2013 to show support for residential school survivors and affirm that every child matters. So today I invite you to join me in taking concrete actions towards truth and justice and reconciliation in your own life. The first step is educating yourself. We all have to educate ourselves on Indigenous histories and cultures, as well as the issues facing Indigenous communities today. Read the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action and find out how you can apply them in your own life or in your own business. Learn which treaty land you're on and the appropriate land acknowledgement for your area. Or take a guided tour of a former residential school to understand their impact firsthand from survivors. Some are even offered virtually. The City of Toronto website at toronto.ca offers a number of links and resources you can explore to educate yourself and support reconciliation, as well as learn about the city's commitments to Indigenous peoples. You can also make a donation to the Indian Residential School Survivors Restoration of Identity Project. Led by the Toronto Council Fire Native Cultural Centre, in partnership with the City of Toronto, it will see the construction of a wonderful spirit garden right at Nathan Phillips Square here at City Hall. This peaceful and contemplative space will honor residential school survivors and all the children lost to their families and to their communities. We'll all be able to reflect there on some of these chapters in our history that are shameful, but that we have to know about, we have to understand so that we will never repeat them. Today and every day we can also support the Indigenous businesses and the artists and the restaurants and organizations that help make Toronto such a thriving and diverse city. These are just some of the ways we can continue to advance truth and justice and reconciliation in our own city, beyond the considerable work being done at City Hall on housing and health and employment for Toronto's Indigenous population, just to name 3 important priorities. Reconciliation is never an easy process. It will take time. It can be uncomfortable to rethink long-held systems of belief, but it is all absolutely necessary. And so today, on the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation, I invite you to reflect on the role we can all play in moving truth and justice and reconciliation forward. And most importantly, please remember the Indigenous lives that were lost or forever changed by residential schools. Thank you.
September 30th, 2021 marks the first National Day for Truth and Reconciliation in Canada's history, as well as Orange Shirt Day. Today we recognize and honor the resilience, courage, and perseverance of residential school survivors, their families, friends, and communities. And we acknowledge the devastating impact residential schools have had on Indigenous peoples in Canada. We remember the children who never came home. Our hearts go out to the families who have lost loved ones. We grieve with them. Residential schools are not only a dark part of Canada's past, their legacy continues to have a lasting and damaging impact on Indigenous culture, language, and heritage to this day. Today we honor those impacted by residential schools. It is because of their bravery and strength to tell their stories that we know the truth. The City of Mississauga is committed to moving forward together by building meaningful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples that is based on mutual respect and understanding. Our work towards reconciliation never stops. Public commemoration of the tragic and painful history and ongoing impacts of residential schools is a vital component of the reconciliation process. That's why today we are displaying all 94 calls of action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on the screens at Celebration Square, as well as playing short films from Indigenous filmmakers. Our clock tower will also be lit orange tonight in support of Orange Shirt Day, as we honor residential school survivors and remember those who tragically lost their lives. I invite you all to reflect on the history and ongoing legacy of residential schools and join us as we honor Indigenous peoples, residential school survivors, their families, and communities.
On behalf of members of Brampton City Council, I am pleased to provide greetings as we recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. I was very supportive when in June 2021, the Government of Canada passed Bill C-5 to establish a new public holiday to honor First Nations, Inuit, and Métis survivors, their families, and communities, and to ensure that a public commemoration of their history and the legacy of residential schools remains a vital component of the reconciliation process. The City of Brampton will recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation Day and Orange Shirt Day through the raising of the Every Child Matters flag from September 27th to October 1st for Truth and Reconciliation Week. On September 30th, flags at City Hall will be lowered at half-mast and the Brampton City Hall clock tower will be lit orange. To help promote continued learning, the City will make available a website with trusted and accessible resources for employees and the public at large at www.brampton.ca/Brampton Remembers. As we recognize the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation and Orange Shirt Day on September 30th, the City of Brampton recommits to undertaking meaningful action that moves us towards greater accountability and towards achieving truth and reconciliation with Indigenous peoples and their communities. The horrific discoveries found on former residential school sites earlier this year have served as a stark reminder of the important work we have left to do as a city and as a community and as a country. I encourage everyone to take part in the city and community-led programming on September 30th and to reflect and to remember. As a city and a community, we all play an important role in building a society that is more compassionate, inclusive, and equitable.
Today is September 30th, and it's Orange Shirt Day. Today, we pledge to open the door to global conversations on all aspects of residential school system and its devastating impacts on Indigenous peoples and communities still to this day. It's a day for us to support the healing journey of survivors and to let them know that they will always matter. Please join me today in wearing an orange shirt while learning and listening to the stories of survivors and their families and honoring those who didn't make it. Every child does matter. For more information and resources, please visit orangeshirtday.org. Thank you, and miigwech.
Hello. I'm speaking to you today from Mi'kmaq, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people.
Tansei, on this day, September 30th, not only is it Orange Shirt Day, but also the National Day for Truth and Reconciliation. It is an opportunity to help educate people of Canada and to create awareness about residential schools and the many lives in the past and present it has affected.
No matter where you're at on your learning journey, I hope each and every one of us can take time today to reflect on what we know and where we want to be, on how we can fit truth and reconciliation into our everyday lives.
Manhã calls for action for truth and reconciliation.
We commit to observing and honoring the significance of reconciliation every day.
Liuna calls for action and a healing path forward.
I encourage everyone to wear an orange shirt that symbolizes every child matters. I also encourage everyone to look up Orange Shirt Day and Phyllis Jack Webstead regarding what happened to her when she was taken to the residential school and how this Orange Shirt Day came about. Every child matters, every grandchild matters, and children are our future.
Every child matters.
Every child matters.
Every child matters.
Hi, hi.
For many Canadians, including myself, we did not learn about the dark chapter of residential schools within our country. But today we're getting it right, following the leadership and the voices of Indigenous elders and experts. We are further embedding mandatory learning on residential schools and learning about the positive contributions of Indigenous people have made to our country, to our community, to all of us. So I want to thank our Indigenous leaders for stepping forward and for leading in a co-development process that I think will build upon our commitment to reconciliation.
With more than 18 Indian residential schools in our province, I want to thank the survivors, the elders, the Indigenous leaders, the education leaders who helped us inform where we are today. And that is that on the heels of National Truth and Reconciliation Day, we are in a better position than we've ever been to ensure that this becomes something that's part of every student's everyday experience so they can reflect on it and use tomorrow as an opportunity to gain a better understanding of the issues, but more importantly, as time wears on, the opportunities that knowing more about our Indigenous history here in Ontario and Canada can enhance our lives.